Hello, and welcome to the North Coast Journal Preview, where we take a look at the stories being followed in the upcoming edition of the North Coast Journal. I'm your host, Dave Frank, and I'm joined by North Coast Journal's news editor, Thad Greenson, and arts and features editor, Jennifer Famiko Cahill. Welcome, guys.
Hi, David. How you doing?
Pretty good. Post-Thanksgiving, the fallout of all that turkey. I guess we've napped our way through the last few days, and now we're kind of making up for it on the flip side. So hopefully you guys had a great holiday.
Got some good family time, and it was nice.
And also, just PSA, if you still have leftovers hanging around and you're watching this, it's too late. You got to move on. If you didn't freeze them, you got to move on. You can make another turkey, I promise. Don't endanger yourself.
Good deal. This is wise words. Actually, this year, the first time we made the soup. So that was a great way to capitalize on all the excess stuff. So yeah, like everything's either frozen, eaten, or pitched. That's great words to live by.
Amen.
Yeah. Let's dive into it. Thad, what are you guys covering this week in the North Coast Journal?
Yeah, so yesterday we had, as we were kind of getting the paper ready to go to press, we had some breaking-ish news, which was that Teresa Frankovich, who we knew was stepping down from her position as health officer of the county, I think blindsided some people by saying that today was her last day. And when I say blindsided some people, I mean blindsided us as the media and not necessarily the rest of public health. I think everybody knew that was the plan. But so December 1st was her last day, and she gave her last media availability. And so we kind of raced to put a story together about that and the general state of COVID in Humboldt County for this week's paper.
Right on. So besides saying her gracious goodbyes, what else did you guys cover in that article this week with her?
Yeah, so just she gave anybody who hasn't seen it should go on the Journal website and watch her farewell address. Really, she has been doing these media availabilities for 8 months now and answering questions from the media. But sometimes she takes the occasion to kind of preemptively address the public at the beginning of them before she gets to questions. And so that's what she did last night, and just gave I felt like a really heartfelt expression of gratitude about kind of being entrusted with this role she's had and the way most of the community has responded to her in this role. And then, reflected a little bit on kind of the community's accomplishments and before ending kind of addressing the challenges that we're currently facing. And so, she's obviously, very proud of the infrastructure that Humboldt County has built up to respond to really the surge that we're starting to see now, as far as both kind of increasing hospital capacity, creating in partnership with the state, creating the alternative care site at Redwood Acres in the event that there is a huge surge that really overwhelms hospital capacity locally, training additional healthcare staff, and then really building up the testing infrastructure and the contact tracing infrastructure in public health locally. And so that's actually our cover story this week, which we've been planning on doing before she gave this address, is looking at the effort to increase testing capacity locally. And it's, I think if nothing else, I think that's a pretty remarkable achievement of public health. First of all, we were fortunate to have a county public health laboratory. It's only one of, I think, 21 in the state.
Wow.
So most counties really, the majority of counties in California do not have one. So we're fortunate that we've had this asset that I think was started really to test milk in the dairy industry, but we have held on to for generations now, and then really kind of got a boost with post 9/11 bioterrorism threats and grant funding and stuff like that. But it went from this small lab that did maybe 120 of these kind of genetic PCR tests, which is the kind of testing that needed to do for COVID, did about 120 of them in a year. The lab director said they do 1 or 2 a day, to now, doing 200 to 300 of them a day. And when you think about kind of the heavy lift of building up that infrastructure in the midst of a pandemic with no organized response, where all counties and states are kind of scrambling against each other to get equipment and resources and supplies and stuff, it's a pretty remarkable achievement. And then, of course, there's a new partnership lab opening at United Indian Health Services this week that will more than double the testing capacity. So, she talked about that, and then, kind of pivoted to saying, as a community, we've really taken this serious. We've really done a lot to try to keep COVID, on the other side of the gates. And now we're at this point where it's obvious that we're seeing some of the same things locally that other parts of the state and country have kind of long been grappling with, just as far as really, exponentially increasing case rates, and talked about, and then kind of ended with a note of optimism of saying that, talking about the vaccine trials and how promising they look, and just how hopeful that she is that really kind of early in 2021, the vaccines become widely available and are really the thing that kind of bring us out the other end of this trying time we've been through.
Yeah, this is all good to hear from your public health expert, that we actually did a great job so far, and that there's hope on the horizon. But one element of the story I just wanted to follow up with you on, in there you guys also, actually you, referenced the governor's most recent announcement, basically that there's a curfew in place. I think we alluded to this last week, but he kind of impressed upon us that we are, the rates that we're seeing are showing increased hospitalizations and ICU utilization. Any feedback that you have about that to share with the audience today?
Yeah, so I mean, certainly statewide, the trajectory is bad. Hospitals are filling up. On I believe it was Monday, the governor had a press conference saying that their projections show that without kind of further interventions, that hospitals throughout the state will be overwhelmed by Christmas. And so he alluded to that they're kind of contemplating drastic measures to try to stave that off. And exactly what those are, we probably won't know until later this week, but it seems very likely that we're going to see another stay-at-home order come from the state. Whether that will be kind of curtailed to only areas that are really seeing impacted hospital space, and it kind of remains to be seen, and how that will be tailored to the tiered system and stuff throughout the state. But it seems pretty clear. And Dr. Frankovich alluded to that yesterday, too, in her media availability, that she does expect some kind of further restrictions to come down the pike. And, I would just add to that, in Humboldt County, we are not yet seeing the kind of a scary run on hospital bed space. But there's kind of every reason to believe that that's looming. Typically spikes in hospitalizations trail about 2 weeks behind case numbers, and we have in recent days been seeing a slow uptick in hospitalizations locally. And, and certainly our case numbers have escalated very quickly over the last couple of weeks and continue to do so. So I think, everybody who hasn't been taking this seriously, this is the alarm bell. As Governor Newsom said, the red flags are waving, and without some kind of, I think, pretty real interventions, both from the government side and then from, I think, just an individual side of deciding that, maybe if we were, fudging around the edges and doing some social gathering, and maybe not wearing our mask or following all the protocols, that now is the time to really do so. Or else some of the really grim scenarios of having to triage hospital space that we've seen in other parts of the country and even the state, we'll be seeing locally, and that's a really scary proposition.
So we're not there yet, but our rates of infection, I think, lead to, you mentioned in the article, and I think it was Governor Newsom who mentioned it, but 12% of daily cases tend to get hospitalized within 2 weeks, and then of those, depending, 10 to 30% of hospitalizations require intensive care or respiratory support.
Right. And yeah, absolutely. And so I did some math, and I don't think it made it into the story, but just looking back at a couple of our high case days, I think we had 56 cases one day, and that's 5 hospitalizations 2 weeks down the road, if those numbers hold. And when you think about having the type of limited healthcare infrastructure that we have in Humboldt County, when we start seeing 5 beds filled up at a time due to COVID, that gets really scary really quickly. Because I think some people look at hospitalizations and think of them only through the lens of COVID, but we have hospitals built out with a certain number of beds for a reason. And that's not a pandemic reason. It's because, people have heart attacks and people get in car crashes, and there's all kinds of reasons that we need that hospital space just in the course of kind of our daily lives. And then when that starts really getting impacted by COVID, it both means that there might not be enough space to treat COVID patients, but then it also means, that person who suffers a heart attack might not have a safe hospital bed to go in. And some of those decisions get really scary really quickly.
Thank you for staying on top of this for us. And I know a lot of people that I run into or speak with, and online or text or whatever, they do reference the fact that they check North Coast Journal regularly for these updates. So we appreciate your work here.
Yeah, it's great to hear. I appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, you got it. How about you, Jennifer? What's going on in the arts and features beat this week?
We have this week a great story by Sarah Godlin, a freelancer. She is writing about school lunch, which I want to stop and take a moment of appreciation for school lunch, which is kind of a wonderful miracle in our society that we are able to feed kids, especially those who are in need. And this year, because of the pandemic, school lunches have had to be even more kind of flexible and really serve students where they are. And Humboldt County Office of Education, through the Seamless Summer Lunch Program, which became the Seamless All Year Lunch Program, basically, has been feeding kids, getting them lunches and breakfasts in some cases for pickup, which is wonderful because there are lots of kids in this county for whom school lunch is, their most stable form of nutrition. So it's been really important and wonderful that this has been serving pretty much, I think, anybody up to the age of 18 has been able to take advantage of this. And it's been wonderful. And there's another fantastic program, which is helping out both students and farmers in our local economy, which, of course, without restaurants, without a lot of the supply chain usual steps that we have in place so that our farmers can sell elsewhere, it's been really hard on farmers to function under COVID. And so the Farm to School program seems even more important in that context. The Farm to School program is something run out of the Humboldt County Office of Education. They have all kinds of people working in their nutrition department, managing school lunches and whatnot. And what Sarah discovered in checking out how local produce makes its way into school lunches, which is wonderful because it can't all be tater tots. I know they're good, but it can't be. And those weird foamy squares of pizza, I can't wait, but I know people love it. So in order to get, local produce from our local farmers and CSAs and whatnot into schools, it's actually a lot of red tape. Sarah kind of jokes in the story that, if kids could eat red tape, they'd all be well fed. Oh. It's one of the most regulated things that schools do is feed children. So there are all these restrictions on who they can order from. They have to get multiple bids. It's like a whole big rigmarole. But because Humboldt County's 100 or so school districts are mostly small, some of them like only for 100 kids or something, because they're mostly small, they can make what's called micro purchases without going through quite as much red tape. A micro purchase is anything under $10,000. Please inform my credit card company that is a micro purchase. But it means that they have more flexibility. But some of the problem that they encountered was, how are we going to get all this wonderful produce to so many schools? So let's say that you are a farmer and you've got, bushels and bushels of carrots. Are you going to drop off like a few pounds at this school, a few pounds at that school? It's not really practical. But what they were able to do is piggyback on the Harvest of the Month. I almost said club, the Harvest of the Month program, which is this thing. If you have kids in school, you've experienced this, where your kid comes home and says, "How come we don't get kohlrabi?" And you're like, "What now?" So what it is somebody comes in from the farm, and these days they're doing this via video, and talks about, an educator comes into the school and talks about a vegetable, how it's grown, who grows it, all that stuff, and also what you can do with it. sometimes they make a recipe, sometimes they make it and, distribute it to the kids, and then they go home with a recipe. And there's a great little example where from Luna Farms, Amy Diekmeyer made what was it? It was a turnip, a Japanese turnip, and it was a hit. And all of a sudden, these kids are going home and being like, "Can you get me some Japanese turnips?" And the same thing. There was a leek dip that came out of Frog Rain Farms, or Rain Frog, and which leek dip. I'm like, leek dip, you say? My kid did not come home with the leek dip, and I would like to speak to someone. But the parents end up having to learn to make these things because the kids love them. It turns out kids love lemon cucumbers. Turns out that, they love all kinds of things if they're presented in a fun context, if they're, given an opportunity to try new stuff, which is a good reminder for those of us who are leaning a little bit on the chicken fingers. But it's kind of a great program. And because they are able to just kind of do the once a month gathering of, let's say you've got the carrots, right? All the carrots get loaded into this giant fridge, put into the farm to school van, which I imagine like the Scooby-Doo van, but with vegetables, and, distributed through this program with some more tacked on for the school to use in the lunches. So it's kind of a wonderful, Sarah describes it as kind of like when you say, "Oh, if you're going to the post office, get me some stamps." They're just sort of piggybacking onto this, and it allows them to distribute, to sort of aggregate the produce and distribute it to the schools separately, so that the farmers aren't driving all over trying to do this and trying to, break even doing it. And the farmers seem to be getting quite a bit out of it. For one thing, it's great to have kids come up to you in the farmer's market and be like, "Hey, I saw your video on picking strawberries," or whatever. And also, it makes families consider broadening their diets and broadening their purchases, because suddenly now you find out that your kid eats kohlrabi. And also, Cliff Clendenin from the Cider Works was saying that, he's just happy that it's fostering good nutrition in kids and getting kids to grow up knowing where their food comes from. Part of what is unfortunate and really broken in our food culture in America is the dissonance between, the food that we buy in the supermarket, the food that we eat, and where it comes from. When you're looking at a boneless, skinless chicken breast that just looks like it emerged out of a lab, it's not the same as knowing where your food comes from. And it's good. It's part of our understanding of our place in the world to know, where our food comes from. And so there's that wonderful connection. But also, Cliff was saying he's even picked up a contract or two because suddenly he's delivering apples, or the school gets apples through the program. And they're like, "Oh, we didn't know that you offered apples to the schools." So they start selling apples to a school, and it ends up increasing their revenue, spreading their word. And as he put it, sometimes the kids are the best ambassadors for your food. And, it's kind of a wonderful program, and I hope it grows.
I thought this was really great. I guess the person we should give a shout out, Erin Durden-Little, who's the Farm to School coordinator at the Humboldt County Office of Education.
She might be a genius to have, with her staff, come up with this incredible plan. And, she really looked at the red tape and kind of like saw code and was able to, navigate it in this really creative way, and really empowered her staff to go around and, and make these connections with farms and, set up these relationships. And once those relationships are set up, then, there's kind of no limit to what you can do. It's really wonderful. And it's lovely to see all these people who got into the game because they wanted to help kids be healthy. And now they can actually do it. It's really wonderful.
it's this virtuous cycle that comes from exposure and reinforcement on the kids' side. They're exposed to it. It reinforces their good, healthy eating habits. They take them home. There was an element of this story that I guess sometimes the recipes and the ingredients at some schools, they take the next step and then they say, okay, now take the recipe home, take the food home. And then maybe families that might not have taken they didn't engage in healthy eating like this. Because like you said, chicken fingers are easy and you don't get any pushback from the kids at all. But I thought this was really cool. And then there's that economic side where we are, empowering local farmers to nourish the community and also make a little money by helping with the transportation distribution across a very wide and dispersed set of school districts. So this was really eye-opening coverage. So I'm glad you guys did this. Yeah,
it was a great story. I'm very grateful to Sarah for going out and getting it.
Right on. So not to throw you guys for a loop, but any last comments or insights you want to make before we wrap up for the week?
Well, we have some great stuff in the rest of the book, including a review of the Del Arte Holiday Show, which is virtual and which you can catch on Keat or streaming. Pat Fitton has that for you in the paper. And also Kitty Trong, who is a new writer for us, writes about how she learned to fish in Humboldt County, which is kind of great.
Nice.
You should check that out.
Right on. Well, thanks, Jennifer. That's just about going to do it for us for this week. North Coast Journal is on newsstands now and available online. Pick one up. Stay informed. Stay safe, everybody. Thad, Jennifer, thank you so much. And we'll see you guys again next week.
See you next week.